The Drew and Fuse Show. The Drew and Fuse Show. The Drew and Fuse Show. They clean up nicely. It's the Drew and Fuse Show. The Drew and Fuse Show. The Drew and Fuse Show. Yeah, they clean up nicely. Yeah.
Hey, what's going on?
What's up, Fusemania? How are you? We made it. Episode 100, 3 years in the making. This is, been an uphill both ways. Is that what the kids say or the old people say?
Uphill.
Up to school to
Yeah,
go get ice cream. Uphills both way.
Well, it's here. 100 episodes. We made it to 100. Wouldn't be possible without the listeners. So thank you guys so much for listening to us each and almost every week. Sometimes we take some weeks off. Sometimes the dog eats the homework kind of thing.
Yes, thank you. Season 3 is live and in full effect, and we're bringing out big guns for this season. So, we're kicking it off with one of the biggest guns that we've been begging for here, right?
Right. Before we introduce him, we just want to take a minute to say if you haven't signed up for directmusicservice.com yet, you can use the promo code Drew and Fuse Show. It'll get you 30% off your first month of activation. So if you haven't signed up for that, what are you waiting for? Go over and give it a try. You'll get edits from myself, Drew, Simo, Danny Diggs, Scooter, Audio One, all kinds of exclusives, phrase, and
Pete
more.
Down.
Pete Down. That's right.
Icon, Throwback Brothers. There's all kinds of people on there. I highly recommend it. Also,
something that Drew and I have been starting is we're partnering up with Crate Hackers. So here soon we got something going on with them. So if you guys have been hesitant to try the Crate Hackers stuff, we got some good news. The 4.0 app is almost out, and it's got some really, really cool features that we can't wait to tell you about. So if you haven't, make sure you check it out. Give them a follow, and jump on that app when the 4.0 comes out, because there's some really cool features.
The features, I think the charts alone are going to make it. Just that new version makes the charts are awesome, and a bunch of the AI stuff they've implemented is pretty dope. So we're using it.
So without further ado, we're going to get into today's guest. He is coming in from Orange County, California. He's one of the guests that Drew and I have really been looking forward to having on the show. We've been asking him for a while. He's been a really big influence to both Drew and I's DJ career. You've probably heard us reference him a bunch on the show. He was one of the original members of Deckstar with DJ AM and all those guys. He was one of the producers of the DJ AM documentary, As I Am, The Life and Times of DJ AM. He's done countless other things, traveled the world as a DJ in that golden era of touring DJs and all that. He's worked with Jon Favreau on the Iron Man movie through the AM part and scoring the music with that. We could go on and on and on about it, but please help us welcome DJ Kevin Scott.
What's up, fellas?
Hey.
First off, before we even jump in, let's just do this. Congratulations on 100 episodes. A big deal. I'm proud of you guys. That is a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much work goes into this, just from planning and editing and getting it out there and promoting it and all those other things. So all of the DAFS punks that are out there need to make sure that they like, subscribe, comment, tell a friend. You know what I'm saying? Like, get active and promote these guys, because these guys have been busting their butt now for 3 years. And I told them if they made it to 100 episodes that I would come on as a guest. So here we are. I mean, we made it. Better late than never, right, fellas? Better late than never.
So the show's over at 101. This is the last episode. I hate to break it.
That's it. Yep, that's it. This is it. So I want everybody to enjoy these couple of hours, because this is the last time you're ever going to see these guys.
And the beauty about that 100 promise was, I think it was on like episode 4 right after Warren, and we're like, it just seemed like light years away.
That's right.
It's
I did
finally
dangle the
here.
carrot. I did dangle the carrot, get you guys thinking big, you know? Like, listen, man, if you're hoping I'm going to say like episode 10, and I'm like, look, if you make it to episode 100, then we're on, man.
And then it's
But you guys did it. You guys made it. Here we are.
and we're stoked. I mean, it does seem like a lot of work in a long time, but we're super excited to have you on. You were major influences in both of our careers. I mean, not to gaslight it any, but honestly, I remember when one of the first times I opened up for you, just going, I'd never thought to do that, you know, just the way you cue point things and other little tiny tricks, you know, it just sparked me thinking in different ways of how I could play live.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of the technical aspects of DJing, you know, especially when it started to go digital, I got really interested in sort of custom edits, cue points, kind of figuring out ways, because from a technical standpoint, I was not into some of the things that, you know, say like AM was into, or Scene, or those guys, where I wasn't a big scratcher. I didn't do a lot of those type of tricks. So I really dove more into the music and the editing. That was kind of my thing. And I think I tried to let that shine as sort of like my calling card or identity as a DJ.
Right. And you know, with that, it comes the programming of it, right? So you're thinking of new ways to like get the wow moments from the programming, and that's always what I took away. So like, I know I was the opener at this club that you came through, Heat, and every time you would come through, me and the owner would always be like, "Kevin's just got it." It's like the programming that it would go all night. So some people would go big and then just fizzle out, and so that editing and having that way of just programming the night. And that's definitely one of the questions we want to talk to you about, is just prepping. But I don't want to jump around. Fuse has the list, but that's one of the things.
I'm
just
prepared.
to kind of reiterate what Drew's saying is, you know, same for me here in Cincy. You know, you always came through and it was always a good time, and I always felt like you always tried to deliver something, you know, fresh and new, whereas like some of the other guys would come through and it would just be like this kind of the same thing, or you could tell like, oh, maybe they just did the same set, you know, the last month at all the places they've ran through. And you know, so I always appreciated it, you know, the effort, especially in a small town like Cincy. You know, people kind of often look over it.
That was actually one of my favorite places to play of all my road gigs was Cincy. You guys are, it just, the venues in general, and all the people I worked with, including you and Ice Cold Tony and some of these other guys that I worked with when I went out there. It always kind of felt like home. So I was able to sort of relax and get into a good groove there, because the difference between playing, you know, here in Southern California is I could sleep in my own bed. You know what I mean? I go to the gig, I DJ it, and I come home and it's like I'm back home. When you travel, especially when I was traveling, it's a whole different ballgame. Like, you get up early in the morning, you drive to the airport, you fly, you know, in Cincinnati's case, you know, you fly like almost 5 hours. It's a 3-hour time change. So by the time I land, it's dark. I got to eat something. I got to go to the club, you know, check into the hotel, go to the club. And it's like the day is really short and it's tiring, even though you're sitting on a plane. It's still, it does something to your body where you kind of have to like recharge and get ready to get into that party mode, like when you get to the club. And for some venues that's harder than others, but in Cincinnati it was like all these friendly faces, and like it was a very comfortable venue. So I always tried to put a little bit more into those sets, because it was something I looked forward to. It wasn't something I was dreading. It was something that I was like, okay, I get to go to Cincy. I know what to expect here. I know what it's going to be like. I want to put on a show. And so mainly like on the flight over there, I would sit there and I would edit, you know, so I would like edit stuff that I wanted to play that night. Like, okay, what do I want to do tonight? Well, I want to switch this up. I want to, you know, I played this last week. It went a little long. I want to edit it down, or I want the hook to come first, or whatever the case was, you know, with the music that I was playing. I was always trying to like come up with something, not just, you know, for the gig, but to kind of wow you guys. Cause there was always like a bunch of DJs that would, especially in Cincinnati, there was a bunch of DJs that would hang out in the booth. So it was like, you wanted to do something for them too. You know, it's kind of like the show behind the show.
Right.
But programming was always number one for me. That's where I put my emphasis and focus. you know, having the best edit of any particular song or the best remix or the best version. That was always at the forefront of everything that I did, because at the end of the day, like, skills are great. There's nothing wrong with that. Some of the guys that are out there are incredible, but really the people that are at the party, they want to hear certain songs. And if I can play them in a way that gets a bigger or better reaction, that's what I'm after. So that's always what I put a lot of my time into, is digging for the best versions, finding those versions, editing them the way that I wanted to, and then putting them all together in a way that made sense. And from a programming standpoint, I always felt like a night should be like, it should be like a story. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You shouldn't just play like every big song in the first hour and then, you know, wing your way through the rest of the gig. No, it's like, you should start out with something big, let people know you're there, and then, you know, continue that story, play some different genres, see what's working. What are they into? Pop, rock, you know, house, hip hop. What do they like? What are they feeling? Try a few of those records out all in that first hour and kind of see what the reaction is, and then build off of that based on the feedback you're getting from the crowd. So yeah, programming was always, that was the thing for me. Like, that was,
You know what's interesting about hearing you talk about it? I've known you for years and years, and hearing you talk about this and just knowing that, you know, you went to school for English and writing, and you're basically, you know, writing a novel at the club.
right.
You know, here's the intro piece. Here's the storyline. Here's exactly what we're gonna do, and here's all of the meat and potatoes inside of it. And having you tell me that right now, I just never clicked. So school is valuable, I guess, kids, right?
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I mean, everybody thought I wasn't going to use that degree. Here I am using it to program DJ nights. No, but I mean, you know, the thing about it is like, I get, that's just kind of the way my brain thinks about these things. Right. And, you know, just like writing or reading a book, right? You're trying to make some sort of connection. And with DJing, you're trying to make a connection with the audience. You want them to buy into what you're doing, have confidence that they're going to hear what they want to hear and that they're going to like what you're doing. So you have to kind of, you know, you have to make that connection with them in order for the night to go really well. And it's funny because, you know, I was talking with my wife the other day about my DJ career, and she goes, you know, like, you never seem to really get like a lot of requests when you were DJing. And I was like, yeah, I didn't really. And, you know, part of that is gaining that trust early on in a set, where it's like, they know that you're going to do what they want to hear eventually. Now, you're always going to get some requests, but like, I never got a ton because I just sort of kicked it off and just, you know, I played somewhat quick and I played all types of stuff. And, you know, I think people just sort of bought into like, okay, this guy's going to play what we like, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think I feel like I feel the same way a lot of times. Like, you know, you might get one or two requests in a longer set that I'm doing, but you know, by the midway point, it's like nobody comes up and makes requests for the most part if you're doing all the right things, like you said, because they trust what's happening.
Honestly, that's a good sign. If they're not making a ton of requests, it's a really good sign you're doing the right thing. I mean, either that or they're dead. But I mean, you know, they're probably not totally dead. So
when I get too many requests, I always call it the tailspin. It's like in Top Gun where they're in the tailspin and Maverick has to pull it out and Goose dies. Sorry, spoiler alert. Anybody hasn't seen the 1985 Top Gun, but
that movie's 30. That movie's 38 years old, so spoilers are allowed on that particular one. You know,
I feel like that's how it is, right? I get in a tailspin when the requests start coming too much. It's like, oh fuck, I'm dead. There's no way I'm recovering off this. You know,
right? Yeah, yeah.
So,
that's definitely a thing. You know what I mean? When it gets to that move, it's like, okay, something went wrong here. I think a little bit. I'm not hitting what they want. You know.
Yeah.
But a lot of times too, though, I think any sort of feedback that you get, whether that be like, you know, screams when a song comes in, or that, you know, that noise, right, that you hear from a crowd when you're really hitting just right with certain songs. That's great feedback. Sometimes early requests in your set, that's good feedback. Kind of gives you a general idea of like, okay, this is where they want to go. Let's try this and see if it's just this one person that wants, you know, some wacky thing, or is this representative of what we got tonight? And I was always, when I would start out a set, I'd have a general idea kind of what I wanted to do. But once I got started, I'd take that feedback. I was always watching, especially the first like 10 songs. I would try to have a variance of genres and decades and whatever in that first 10 songs, and really like pay attention. What are they doing? Are they moving? Are they into it? Are they giving me any feedback? Like, what do we got tonight? Because every night is different. I mean, they're never the same. Even at the same venue, they're never the same. So
Right.
I think reading the room, as they say, is extremely important, especially at the beginning of your set. Take the cues from what are you seeing? What are they reacting to? What don't they care about? And the best way to do that is to play a wide range of genres and play them quickly. Let's see what happens. So that was kind of that's the way I always tried to approach it, especially out of town. Because you just don't know, like certain cities, especially the first time you play there, you have no idea like what you're in for, what they're into. I'd always try to ask some questions, like before I get started, try to talk to the resident or the manager or whatever, and be like, hey, what have you seen that goes off here? And just try to get a feel for what I'm into. Because some places, regional music is, regional to a certain degree. So you got to you got to do your homework. You got to ask questions too,
Yeah.
All right. Before we get too far down the music road, Drew was really wanting me to play this segment video for you today. It's a golden one. So here we go. We're gonna play this.
Hey, this is the king of pop, Michael Jackson. Drew and Fuse, let's talk questions. In fact, let's do some rapid fire. Now, I know these rapid fires aren't always so rapid fire, and that is okay by me. I got nothing but time. Now, let's look at the man in the mirror and get started.
I just never thought I'd get an actual live look at Michael Jackson in 2023. He's looking a little gray. That was frightening.
So good.
That's terrifying.
We're asking a lot of questions, and I wanted to bring back a classic. Go ahead.
So one of the things, we're talking a little bit about music and DJing. I think the first thing I want to mention is that you've kind of been retired from traveling and DJing. Do you miss it at all? And if so, what are the things that you miss?
10 years. It was a long time. To be totally honest with you, the first 8 years that I was retired, I didn't miss it at all. The last 2 years, I've started to miss it. There are a lot of things about it that I probably don't miss. Some of the things that I do miss, though, is I really did like to do the prep work. I really did like to find music and edit it and put it together. I still love putting together music. I don't miss the travel, the airports, the late nights, the drinking, all those things I don't miss very much. But I am getting to a place now, where I'm considering the idea of doing some things here and there, like playing some music, doing some sets, because I still really do love music. And I also really like the direction that we're headed musically now, compared to where we were, say, like 5 years ago. So I'm kind of liking what I'm hearing and seeing people playing. So I'm kind of like, oh, I think I could lend something to this. Whereas like 5 years ago, I was kind of like, yeah, this isn't what I'm into. Like, I didn't really feel any inspiration to like do anything,
What are some of the things that you're liking right now musically, like that you do like?
Well, I started DJing in the 80s, right? So I was playing open format back then. So I love all of those sounds. I love 80s sounds. So now it's like, some of the indie dance stuff I really like that's coming out. In particular, there is a particular artist I really like in that scene, Roosevelt, who I've seen play live a few times. And I think he's incredibly gifted. He doesn't have one bad song in his discography. The guy is awesome. So if you guys don't know, if you're not up on Roosevelt, I would just like in your car, like throw on Roosevelt on Spotify or whatever and listen to it. The guy is awesome. I like that. I like, I really, over the last few years, really got into like Purple Disco Machine. I think his stuff is awesome. I like the disco sound. I like dance music in general, like just more danceable type stuff. I don't like real low tempo stuff. Like I never really enjoyed playing sets in the 60, 70, low 80 BPM range. I really like to try to keep things above 100. And particularly the sweet spot for me was usually right around like 120 ish. That's kind of like that to me is dance music. And that's what I'm kind of most into. So, and I'm seeing a lot of that, I'll go see Drew play like at Bungalow, and, he's playing mostly stuff in that range and, getting good response. And I'm like, okay, you can sort of visualize yourself playing that music again, as
Right.
opposed to, 67 BPM, which I just can't see myself. But
We wanted to kind of talk about is, we know you're just on the road podcast and you talked a lot about DJ AM stuff, and while we might get into some of that today, we also just want to say, if you guys want to hear a lot more about that, you can check out Kevin's interview on the road podcast. It's a really good interview. But one of the things today, we wanted to focus a lot on you and kind of, your start with getting on Deckstar. How did that kind of come about at the time?
yeah, so well, I was DJing at a club here in Orange County for a long time, since the late '90s, and I had started. I had a residency there. I was there every Thursday, and it was a really successful like college bar. It was doing really well. It had a line out the door, and it was. I'd kind of built a little bit of a sound there, and kind of like an audience there, and I was also making records, doing my own edits and things like that. And it was through that connection, of making records, that I met AM. And we instantly became, good friends. And as we became friends, he had come down to that club in Orange County once to see me play, and he kind of saw what was going on there, and he was opening his own club in Hollywood, called LAX. And he asked me to be the resident there, and this was in 2005. And that was like a big departure for me, because I was just basically playing like college bars, college parties, um, yeah, doing a few mobiles here and there, but I had not jumped into the LA scene or anything like that. But I think he sort of saw what I was doing there in Orange County, and he's like, this dude can hold it down. I like the style of music that he plays. We had a lot of him and I had a lot of music interests in common. We liked all the same stuff. Like new record would come out, we're both like, "Oh, this is dope." We both like the same retro style music, like '80s and all that kind of thing, and rave music. Like we had a lot of similarities in the music that we liked. So he put me on at LAX, and I was the resident there on the weekends when it first opened, which was a big deal. That club was in a lot of tabloids. It was in a lot of magazines. There was a lot of big nights there. Big stars would go there. Like it was a big deal. And through that, I basically became marketable as a DJ that could, somebody that they could send out on the road, that, that bookers wanted to book. And actually started getting some gigs before Deckstar on the road. I did a gig in Kansas City, a gig in San Francisco, a gig in Seattle
Before Dexter?
before Deckstar.
How did some of those come up?
So the first one was Kansas City, the Harris Casino out there. It was being booked by Matt Colin, who was part of Deckstar. Eventually, he was Steve Aoki's manager, and he was booking like Spider and Steve Wonder and Tina T, I think, and they were doing a rotating thing there in Kansas City, and somebody couldn't do one of them, and so he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, do you want to go do this gig in Kansas City at the Voodoo Lounge at Harris Casino?" And I was like, "Yeah," and it paid pretty good. And I went out and did it, and it went really, really well. And so they were like, "Well, we want you to come out regularly." And then I had another gig in Seattle that was through DJ Scene, actually through MySpace. DJ Scene reached out to me, and he was working with this with a promoter, and he's like, "The promoter really wants to book you because you're at LAX." And what had happened though was, when I was at LAX, I made a live mix CD called LAX Live, and that mix CD was like a pretty big deal. Like it got into a lot of hands. Like we pressed a few thousand of them, and I just gave them out like constantly. And so the guy up in Seattle had heard that mix, and he's like, this is what we want up here, And so they booked me. And then AM's road manager, this guy, Steve Dubb, not the Steve Dubb we know, but another guy named Steve Dubb. He had a relationship because AM was playing all these clubs, and he's like, I can get you booked in Sacramento. I can get you booked in San Francisco. So he just went ahead and started talking to the bookers and got me a couple gigs there. And then at that point, that was like my 4th out of town gig. And then AM's manager, LV, came along. He said, hey, we're starting this thing called Deckstar in a month. We want to, stop booking your own gigs. We'll book you, because they wanted to, get a piece of those. He's like, but we're going to add a bunch more to your calendar. And they did, from there, I started doing like a ton of big rooms, including Cincinnati. I did Mount Adams Pavilion, Atlantic City, Detroit, Chicago, like, just a bunch of different cities. And pretty soon, within, I think it was maybe like 3 months or so of being on Deckstar, I had like 11 out of town residencies, like regular monthlies or bi-monthlies, playing at pretty big clubs all across the US, along with, other one-off parties. So, I mean, it happened quickly. Once I got to LAX, once I started booking my own stuff out of town, it took off. And pretty soon I was like every weekend, I was playing somewhere.
And today it's somewhat of an anomaly to kind of get this happening. But we were talking the other day. What's your advice to, like, if that's somewhat in your goal to start accomplishing now?
Well, I mean, I think the key is to master your own city, right? To be the guy in your city that people show up to see play. Like that. I mean, that's what you have to do. Before you're ready to take your show on the road, you got to perfect it where you're from. Right. So to me, the advice would be hustle at home. Right. So create an audience, get people that want to come back every week, either just to hang out with you. Like I used to have, even at the place I did in Orange County, there'd be a ton of people hanging around the booth. It was like social hour, right? It's like they wanted to come, They wanted to say what up, and be a part of this thing that you're building. So you have sort of like your core people, like picture Cheers, the bar, right? You got, you got Norm and you got a bunch of people hanging out at the bar, and then you got all the other people that show up because this is the place to be, right? And you can do that through the vibe and the music and creating an excitement level. And if you're getting people regularly coming to see you play, wherever that is, and I would recommend that be a regular residency, a place that you're at every week that people know, okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to see, Fuse, or I'm going to go here and I'm going to see Drew. Build it that way. Start there. Build something. Figure out what it is that you want to sound like and what you want to do. Test it out with those people. Build something positive, and then go from there. I would also suggest making mixes and putting content out to the world is important. Like what you guys are doing with the podcast, important. It's not about the views or the likes. It's about putting yourself out there and allowing people to connect with you and understand what you're about, learn who you are, learn what you're into. That's how you make those connections, right? Is through the content. And one way you can do that as a DJ is by making mixes. People, be creative, make mixes. People are gonna be like, oh, okay, this guy's, in Fuse's case, right, is really into like 00's alt rock. Like that becomes part of your identity. It's something that you love. It's a music that you like. You make mixes surrounding that. You were doing the TRL mixes, right? Like that sort of thing that you connect with. Like for me, that was like, 80s or whatever. For Drew, maybe it's like 90s punk or whatever it is. But you create, that's how you start to gain people that are into what you do, is when you put yourself out there, whether it's a form of a mix or this type of media or whatever the media may be. So, my advice is master the city that you're in now, put content out, make connections with people, and then build from there. And you'll know, you'll start to, people will want you to come where where they're at.
Yeah.
Like a good example of this is like, Phenom, who does the 5 on 5 podcast, sponsored by DMS. He's really into blog era stuff. That's his thing. He's a little bit younger than me, but that's what he connects with. And so like he's connected with a lot of people through that. He'll either go to LA or they do that party out in Vegas or whatever. And he's connecting with like-minded people that are into the same thing that he's into. It's, that's the way I see it playing out. And the other thing is it takes time, like it didn't, although the traveling happened fast for me, the build up to all of that was a long time.
Right.
You know, it did not happen. It happened just by small building blocks over a long period of time, and then it just sort of exploded into something much bigger. You know.
I wanted to just gaslight Fusemania because he is apparently the guy in his city. He asked Chat GPT and it said, who's the
Simo
best
asked
DJ in
Chat GPT. Let me correct it. I'm not Googling
Okay.
myself over here. Okay? It's
Then
not
who's the
what's going
biggest
on.
DJ? And Fusemania was #1 in Cincinnati.
That's amazing.
And Chat GPT. So it is real for that.
And Fuse just did the DJC and did a set of all rock,
Yeah.
Right.
00's all rock, which is his thing. So this is an example, right? I mean, being asked to go to a major DJ conference and play a specialty set, and you know, all of that is possible through what he's been doing, like all of these building blocks. I mean, this is what it's about, right? And that step could lead to the next thing that leads to the next thing, and before you know it, you know, who knows what kind of things you're asked to do. I mean, that's
Right.
basically how it works, you know.
And
Right.
and even his TRL party mix, I mean, that I would listen to that all the time just for ideas. And it was, I mean, is that still up? That people can check it
Yeah,
out?
Drew, you got to come play one of the parties.
Yeah,
You,
we ended up
that's
doing a party because of it.
right.
It was pretty
Right.
pretty cool. It was a lot of fun. So I fully support everything that you're saying. And me and you even did our own party, Kev, where
That's
it was
right.
the whatever party,
Right.
and
Yep.
basically putting our identity out there and saying, you know, this is what we're gonna do. And oh man, what a good party that was. It was so much fun.
That
It's
was
coming
yep.
back 20 years later.
Here we go. It's the 15-year reunion. No, like that was super fun. Like that was the first time we really, you know, tried to promote and do like our own party, which is, you know, as you guys know, is a lot of work, you know. But the concept behind it was so much fun. And you know, the idea was just like we're gonna play whatever we want. Like there are zero rules
Yeah.
because you know, we really loved open format, like the unpredictable nature of playing open format, that anything can come after anything. And Drew and I had been doing that for a while, and we're like, let's just do a party. And we somehow talked Nico, who is Nico. Nico is a
Shout
guy
out
who did
Nico.
all of AM's logos. He did my logo, my Santa Cruz logo, and he did all of our artwork for us. And
Yeah.
it was the artwork that we had every week was incredible. Like he just knocked it out of the park week after week. We should try to find a few of those and put them in the edit
Oh
so
yeah.
people can see what they look like. They were great.
It's
And
so good.
you know, and every week we would get all these weird, funky, like early YouTube clips and throw them up on the screens at the venue, and then we would just play crazy music. And there was a few nights there that were really wild, like
Yeah.
where we really got people just like kind of freaking out the whole night. You know,
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. We should bring that back.
We should bring that back. 15-year anniversary. I think it's coming back.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know if that's
So
been that long, but I'd like to bring it back for that.
one of the things that you mentioned, you know, being important, and we've talked about it a little bit, is the signature mixes, and you know,
Yeah.
mixes that you can do to get other people looking. Obviously, you know, like AM had a bunch of signature mixes. Kevin, I can remember a few of yours off the top of my head. One being the feature presentation mix that always played in the CDJ before the DJ went on at Pavilion. A lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
you know, AM had the Elton series mixes. He had obviously like the legendary Power 106 mix. You know, wanting to talk a little bit about the importance of, you know, that kind of stuff. And then too, like the influence I feel like that your Destination Nowhere mix had on like DJ culture as a whole.
Yeah. Well, so signature mixes, let's start there. So like two things there. I think it's important to have signature mixes, meaning full length mixes, but I also think it's important to have signature mixes of just a few songs. So like, again, in AM's case, it was like Wonderwall, right? Or
Right.
Journey, in another one, Bites the Dust into Journey, Don't Stop Believing. Like these mixes they sort of became known for. And I had a few of these too, with like, I would do when I was making a lot of custom edits, I would do like I had one where I do Temperature, an acapella out of Sean Paul Temperature, into One More Time by Daft Punk, and that one always got like a big reaction. And I had a few of those that were sort of like mixes that I would play every night. that I knew worked. They were slam dunks and they would get a big reaction. And I think that's important. I think a lot of DJs have sort of gotten away from that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like having signature mixes. I certainly think, part of the night you just need to like figure it out and feel it out and try things. But I think it's important to have some signature mixes, some things that you become known for, because when people come back to see you every week, they want to have a good time, but they also want that bit of familiarity, that thing that they sort of feel like is theirs, like they know about, right? It's like when you go see a band, their music, all their songs, like you're excited when you hear that song, even though you've heard it before. It's the same thing with signature mixes to me, is like, you should have a few of those in your bag, a few things that are like, okay, I've tried this. This is perfected. This is going to get a big reaction. I know this is part of my night and part of my set. So that's one part of it. I think having those signature mixes is important. And then I think also having what you were talking about with the full length mixes, it's always good to put things out that you believe in and see what the reaction is, and come up with mixes that maybe aren't just the hits, right? Maybe you really like or know about music that you think not everybody knows about, and you put it together and you put it out there. That has a really strong effect too. And like you brought up with Destination Nowhere, what happened with that was, and I've never actually told this story before, but so the genesis of that is, a lot of the indie dance stuff really sounded like 80s music, which is something that Adam and I really bonded over. We would battle, do you know this obscure 80s record? We would do that back and forth on AOL Instant Messenger. And I remember it was shortly before he passed away. He did a great party in LA. It was a backlot party that him and Travis did. Weezer played, and then Blink 182 played for the first time together. This was a private party. There was maybe a couple thousand people there. And that was like Blink's first time back together with the original lineup. This is 2009. I want to say it was like early June of 2009. And then when all of those acts were done, Adam went back on and just played a DJ set. And, these LA parties, they're a little bit different than a traditional party. There's a lot of sort of stars there and industry people. So you're not getting like, they were, of course, front and center for the bands, but like when the DJ's playing, they're just kind of mingling and doing their thing. So Adam was playing indie dance stuff. And one of the records that he played that night, that I don't even think it was out yet, but he got a lot of promos and music that before it was out. And he played Bag Raiders, Shooting Stars. And he's like, dude, check this out. And I was standing next to him and he played it. And that record really stuck in my head. And it was like a little moment that we kind of shared together. And it was like and that was kind of, that's on Destination Nowhere. And that was kind of the genesis of that. He passed away shortly after that. And I wanted to make a mix, but I wasn't in a headspace to make a club mix. I just didn't want to, I wanted to do something different. I'm like, you know what? I just want to make something different. And what I had in my head was that moment with him at that party. And I had in my head the Elton mixes, which were a big success. They're, if you're not familiar with them, they are on the DJ AM Lives Mixcloud page. There's 5 of them. They're called Elton mixes. They're named after the first one was a party he did at Elton John's house where he was playing all this music, and Elton basically told him, just keep playing that music. Like, I don't want you to play commercial music. Just play this, alternative and different styles of music. And so he basically put that out and got a big response. So he kept making those, which was just music he liked to, you could listen to in your car. And so I just sort of had this idea, those sort of ideas in my head. And I thought, I want to do something just this indie dance sound was starting to emerge, and I really liked it. I wanted to make something like that. And at that time I had done a few mix CDs with LRG, which was a big clothing company. They were sponsoring me, sending me clothes, and had sponsored some of the pool parties and other things that I was doing. And so the cool thing about that was the owner of that company, who's also no longer with us, Jonas, he was very open-minded. Like he was like, hey, if you want to do something cool, just do it. Well, like, we'll foot the bill on getting the CDs pressed, and, we'll help you with the artwork. And, they were, cause it was a big company. Like, they had a whole team of artists and, people making the clothes and doing the graphics. I mean, this was a big company. And So I made maybe like 30 minutes of the mix of Destination Nowhere, and I took it in and I said, I'm about to finish this thing and I want to put it out. What do you think? And I played like 5 minutes of it, maybe 10 minutes of it in his office. And he's like, all right, I've heard enough. He's like, I love it. Let's do it. And I was like, oh, dope, like, okay, cool. Because I was kind of taking a chance, as a commercial DJ to make a mix that really was not a commercial mix. It was not a club mix. It was not a sound that I was associated with. People didn't know me for that sound. I was just sort of putting myself out there. I wanted to do something different. And that whole team, we got together and they helped figure out the name for it. It was Jonas's assistant walked in while we were playing it, and I was kind of telling him like about it and what I thought about it. And it was funny because he's like listening to it for like 2 minutes, and he looks up and he goes, Destination Nowhere. And I was like, that's it. And then we took it over to this artist guy and we're like, yeah, so we got this mix and, here's 30 minutes of it, listen to it. And we want to call it Destination Nowhere. And I go, I'm thinking earth tones. I don't, we could put in what the cover looks like on the video or whatever. So people know, but I was like, I'm thinking earth tones and I'm thinking like a beach and like, kind of like, just this laid back vibe and, whatever. And he's like, okay, I got it. And it was like within 24 hours, he sent a mock-up of the artwork over, which is exactly what we went with. And it was one of those mixes that everything came together in a really organic way. And it just sounded right. It felt right. It looked right. And I think, it's not always easy to do that, but that particular one, it just came together and it's sort of stood the test of time, I think, and musically and just the way it sounds,
I still listen to it all the time. It's a fantastic mix.
I feel like at the time, there were a lot of like DJs, but DJs were still kind of like on. Now everybody's DJ and there's DJs everywhere. But at that time, I feel like, people were still playing party music, but like it really broadened the sense of like, you can play a vibe. You can be a DJ that's like keeping a mood. You don't have to be a DJ always that's like making it spring break in the room, like it,
right.
you can be enhancing what's going on by just keeping a good vibe. And I think that mix really like showed that, and it showed that and put it out to like the world, like that you can do that.
So I used to press CDs as well, and I always think, that some would end up on the floor, but it was fine. It was still the easiest way to get a new listener to get it into their hands. And it sucks nowadays. There is that challenge of getting that new thing. So somehow coming up with maybe a USB promo or something might be on the horizon of other DJs. It could be a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, exactly. It is trickier. I would think it was always great to like give somebody something free. They'd be stoked on it and they'd put it in their car. And now it's like, okay, how do I do that? How do I make that connection after the club is over where they want to listen to what I'm doing? It is definitely a challenge. I haven't really wrapped my head around it because I'm not as active. I'm sure that would be something I would absolutely try to figure out and crack the code on. But yeah, I do. It is important to like get people to start listening to you, like when they have a party or a get together, or even when they're getting ready to go out, that they choose to listen to what you're doing. Like that is definitely what I would be trying to crack. I would want people to I would want to be their go-to,
Yeah.
And I have thought about it here or there. I'm like, well, maybe, the easiest way is a Spotify playlist, but that doesn't have the power of a mix. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
even the remixes are lacking or any of that,
Right.
So much of the stuff we do is custom edits. So
yeah,
a lot of some of the stuff that we make amazing isn't necessarily amazing when you put it on Spotify. Right. It doesn't have that remix, or it doesn't have the chorus that comes in first, or, it just doesn't have the same vibe, really.
It doesn't. I mean, and it also doesn't really get a chance to showcase what your skill level is, because if your skill level is programming and editing and all of those things, well, that's not going to translate at all. Really, all you're getting is just taste in music, which, I mean, a lot of people have that, right? But not a lot of people can do the edits and put the music together in a way that creates energy and creates a mood, right? Like a strong mood. I mean, a good DJ mix should make you forget what time it is. You know what I'm saying? Like you just get lost, like, and you get this rush of energy. That's the power of music, and good DJ mixes do that, right? They sort of, I remember like Danny Diggs used to text me a lot because he'd get on an airplane to go do a gig and he'd text me a picture of like, I don't know, it was like an iPod or something, but it would be like Destination Nowhere. He's like, I'm putting, I'm going to just zone out on this plane and I'm going to put this mix on. And for the next hour, I'm just going to get lost. Right. And I'm like, what was dope to me about that was, well, obviously that he chose to listen to that mix, but what was really dope about that was that's what that mix is sort of for, is to get lost. Right. Like you want to get lost in that wherever you are. That's the whole point. That's why it was named Destination Nowhere, where it's like you're just getting lost in this sound for an hour. And that's the power of a good DJ mix. And, that particular one, that's what the goal is. But maybe you make a party mix or a TRL mix. Like, let's say you make a TRL mix. You want people to get lost in that time period. It takes them right back to like that time period. And they remember things from whether it was their childhood or whatever age they were. It's funny because, I've been telling Drew that I've been sort of digging through my iTunes again and like cleaning it up and doing more work to it than I've ever done. And one of the things that's happened is like, I'll come across a track that I don't totally remember it. Like I'll be like, what was this song again? And then I'll play it like, cause I'm going to, put cue points or whatever on it. And it instantly takes me back to like that time period. And all of these like memories come rushing back in that like aren't at the forefront of my mind, but the song brings them out. Right. Like it instantly transport me back to that place. And I was doing that like the other night. And I'm like, holy shit, man, music is so powerful because it's making these neurons in my brain fire off and remember all of these memories that are basically sort of like lost. And it's digging them all back up just by hearing like 15 seconds of some song that I forgot about. And, I think that's really just a reminder of like how powerful music is. And when it's put together right, it has that effect on people, whatever the desired effect is that you want to have, and I think people should keep that in mind. Like that is, finding those songs that trigger those things in people. It doesn't always have to be the obvious. The obvious plays a role, right? Obvious music plays a role, but sometimes it's like that oddball record that you get that huge reaction from. That's the one that you should be looking for, because that's the one, look at your audience. How old are they? What's that record going to be? Let's try it out. Cause I mean, really, what difference does it make if you play one record that doesn't do great? Like what really gets hurt? I mean, your ego, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody's not going to leave because you played, a minute or 30 seconds of a song that didn't work. But what's the upside? If it works, now you've got them the rest of the night, man. They are in your hands. You know what I mean?
And even on mixes, I like it just as much because it really helps make that mix unique. It's just that little piece. Like when I listen to somebody's mix, somebody sends me a mix and I'm listening to it and it's like, yeah, you got all the bangers on it, but I mean, why wouldn't I just hire the guy that does all the bangers? Like, why is it different? What's getting me thinking.
I mean, that music knowledge is an important part of DJing, right? Like that shouldn't be skipped over. Anybody can look at a top 100 chart. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's not, but knowing which records are going to work that aren't, obvious, that's where you're showing that musical knowledge. And that's where people become more impressed. And also it gives you that identity that we talked about earlier. I mean, all those things are so important, I feel like. And a lot of that is getting skipped. It seems like, at least from what I hear and what other people tell me, is like some of these steps are sort of just being skipped now. It's like, it's too easy to just play bangers. So that's all we're going to do. And it's like, no, man, you got to put in a little bit more effort than that,
Yeah. Keep them thinking. One of the things I wanted to ask, when I would see you play, and we talked about it earlier in the podcast, but you were curating and do all these custom edits, and you kind of, I don't know if you started it, but you would do this acapella out, and you would have, it would just come in with, it was almost like a live mashup, right? And it would come in with this crazy banger. I see so many DJs do it wrong on TikTok, where it's like the acapella comes out and it's a flat outro, it's a flat intro, and it's just, why are you ruining the song by doing that? You're not sounding tight, you sound lame. I want you to explain how you did it, and if you're willing to give us some of like a super secret way that you tagged it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know what you're getting at. No.
That
Well, I mean,
was the only one.
Okay, all right. Well, with the start of Serato, when Serato came out, it was like this light bulb went on, like, oh, I can make anything now and play it that night. And so I had all these acapellas because I was making blends and stuff, and I just had this idea, like, well, we should just do live blending, like make these puzzle pieces, these edits, right? Because like to me, an edit was always about the best way to play a song. So it'd be like an intro and then maybe the hook and then one verse and then out. Like either
And
mixing on the hook or maybe an acapella out, right?
And I want to add to this. We do hear like some people are dropping on the one or doing that stuff. This is still just like a clean way of, you're still in theory dropping on the one. You've just edited it to where it's just cleaner and it's mixable.
Right. And the genesis of that was like a lot of the radio guys out here in LA at that time when I first got interested in this were playing like instrumentals and then playing the record right after it, right? So they would, scratch in, mix in the instrumental and then play. And I was like, man, that's not going to work in a club. Like that's just like, there's no energy to that, right? I want to make these edits so that you can mix like this cleanly, but that have more energy. So maybe go into the hook or whatever, right? And you're right, you're still dropping it on the one, but you're creating almost like a new song out of it. So one of the things I would do is I would take those acapellas and make an acapella out on one of the hooks. And then I would find something that was in key. This is, before mixed in key, and try to find something that was in key and put it underneath it. But the idea was that it would be a beat that had a lot of impact. So it would be a beat that like when people hear it, they get excited. A good example of this, like from back then in the early 2000s, was like "Ain't No Fun" by Snoop Dogg, right? What back then, I mean, that doesn't translate as much now, but back then, when anybody would hear that beat, you'd get a scream from the audience, right? So drop that beat under an acapella out, and now you are, you're mixing while you're doing it, but you're creating a lot more energy than you would if you just dropped it. And so that was kind of where it started. And like now, I think you have so many tools available at your fingertips now with mixed in key, and there obviously now there's so many mixable intros, through all the various services and editors out there doing stuff, that you could create a system hypothetically where you label all of your stuff in a way that makes it very easy to identify what records you could play. So like, let's say you had
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, if you had a flat intro that went into like a really recognizable beat, right? And you knew the key of that, then you could, on your acapella out, the key of that. So now you could just search for, you could label it in the comments, let's say, impact beat, on the second 8 bars or on the intro. And then whatever that key is, let's say of the acapella out, you could type in impact because that's the word you're using, or whatever word you want to use. You could type in impact in your search bar and then the key 8A or whatever, 6A or whatever it is. And you could see all of those songs that have an impact sound to it. And then you could start to figure out either on the fly or as you're practicing which songs are going to be in key with those acapella outs. And you could create energy and you can mix and match and figure out new combos. And you could hypothetically create some really exciting blends on the fly, right? Or part of your signature mixes, like I did back in the day with what I talked about earlier, like Temperature into One More Time, things like that, where you're creating more energy than you typically would. And that's also giving you an identity as well. So, hypothetically, that's one thing you could do.
Is that the tagging you used hypothetically?
Yeah, hypothetically, I might use that tagging. Yeah,
that's the word you put in there in the comments.
Yeah, hypothetically, this could work.
Just talking a little bit about programming, and last year we did a panel at DJC with you, Spider, Warren, me, and Drew, Scooter. If I'm missing somebody, I'm sorry, but one of the things that we were supposed to talk about was programming. Would there be any one other like piece of advice to guys that want to be better at programming that you could give?
I mean, the single biggest DJing piece of advice / programming piece of advice that I could possibly give any DJ is that girls run the party, period. Don't play to the dudes, play to the girls every time. Okay. If that means playing songs that you don't think are cool, but the girls are going to like, you do it anyway. Because once the girls buy in and are having a good time, everything else falls into place. So programming wise, find out what girls like. I'd even suggest, like, if a girl comes up with a request, like ask her, what else do you like? Just get an idea, especially if, if she's a good looking girl and, she's there with a bunch of other girls. This is a great, a great thing to like tap into. Like, well, what do you and your girls like? Like, what kind of music do you like? Oh, you like Taylor Swift? Okay. Taylor Swift mega set coming up, like Drew does every week. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of thing, like, getting these cues. But the number one thing for programming is make girls happy, and then everything falls into place. I also, like I said earlier, don't blow everything in the first hour. Like, a bunch of reasons for this. Number one, you want it to be busy during your entire set. Number two, the bar or the club that you work at is going to do a lot better financially if you keep people there and the whole time. And if you're building a night and you keep going and you build into something that lasts all the way to the end of the night, they're going to do better. They're going to be happier with you. Your audience is going to be happier with you. So, playing all the biggest songs right when you get on, because, you need to hear, like, you need to get that rush of like everybody into what you're doing. That's a mistake, in my opinion. You've got to like build a night. So start out with a few and pace yourself. You know what I mean? And have moments where if you do feel like it might be, I don't know, dragging a little bit or slowing down, or the floor, people are moving in and out, then hit them with something big. But if you blow them all, then you don't have that. That's not at your disposal. So those are a few of the things I would say programming wise that I kind of always went with.
It's crazy, and I 100% agree. But like anymore, when I'm playing at the spots I do are all mostly party bars, so it's just party sing along music, and pretty much everything that I play right now that I work, like that works. I feel like if I'd have played it 10 years ago, it was cheesy. It was cheesy. So like now it's like the cool stuff is what was uncool 10 years ago.
Totally true, man. It's so crazy. Like when I go, okay, so one of the things I've been doing, I was saying I was going through my iTunes. One of the things I've been doing is like going through, the 2000s and the 2010s, right? Which, doesn't seem that long ago to me, but I mean, it's almost 2024, right? And I was going through it and I'd see some of the stuff that Drew played, everything from like, Taylor Swift. I think a long time ago we talked about that 303 song, Don't Trust Me, or whatever.
Right.
And you were telling me like, oh yeah, it goes off or whatever. I never ever once played that song when it was new. So there's this thing that happens over time where like these songs that weren't songs we played in the club, these though become the throwback tracks. They were really cheesy. They become the throwback tracks that everybody wants to hear because they were younger, or because it's just like those are the ones they identify with. And it's a wild thing that happens with older music, because there's like songs it's like, I never played that, like we were talking the other day, like even when the Killers' first album came out, when I was at LAX, the track that I always played that was big was not Mr. Brightside. I mean, I did play Mr. Brightside. I don't want to say I didn't play that, but it was the first single that I used to play all the time.
Somebody told you?
What's that? Yeah, Somebody Told Me.
Yeah.
That was the song. And I had a bunch of blends. Like there was one over like the Gorillaz, and like, there was like some good blends for that. I think there was one over like Blue Monday by New Order. And that was the Killer song that I played at LAX. And I did play Mr. Brightside sometimes, but that wasn't the big song. Well, dude, now when you think of the Killers, you only think of Mr. Brightside. Somebody Told Me is not a song you play, really, right? I mean, it's always Mr. Brightside, right? And that has evolved over time, because back then that wasn't the case. That wasn't the way it was. They were pretty even, and as a matter of fact, Somebody Told Me was kind of, that was kind of the one. It was like Somebody Told Me Into the Bravery. Remember that song? Honest Mistake.
Yep.
Nobody plays Honest Mistake anymore, but that was the jam back in like big. 2005.
That it was just as big.
Is it big?
No, it was just as big as
Oh yeah,
the
it was.
Killers.
Yeah, it was. And it's funny because like over time though, that's not what's really remembered, right? That's not what the big throwback song is. It's a different grouping of songs that I wasn't playing. And so that as I've been going through my I mean, dude, there's some of the songs that you guys have told me about that I didn't even have in my Serato. I'm like, I don't even have that. I have to go download it. Like I don't even like I was like, really?
Right.
That's the big song? And you're like, yeah, that's the big song. And I'm like, I never even
Like
played
Justin
that.
Bieber Baby. Like
Yeah,
when
never
that
played
song
it.
came out, it was like, yo, I'm gonna try to avoid playing this. Like this is corny, super corny. And now it's like
I mean, the only DJs that had that back then were doing like 7-year-old parties. You know what I'm saying? Oh,
right,
my
right.
kid's turning 7. I better have Justin Bieber. But all the rest of us were like, dude, Justin Bieber. No, we're not playing that. And now that's like the banger. You know, it's so weird.
Right.
But that's what happens over time. You know, like it's like it creates this whole new group of throwbacks that weren't, you know, were not the move. But I kind of like that, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
I don't mind it. I think it's kind of cool. You know.
No, it is cool. It's uh, an adjustment to like your mindset, I think too, though, and it's a test to like a DJ to be like, sometimes you have to get over the hump of like doing what you think is cool and doing what's good, you know, and what's good for the moment and the environment of what you're playing in.
Yeah, I definitely think that you shouldn't be overly concerned about playing some cheesy records, especially if the girls are gonna like 'em. Like that's not a. I mean, who cares? That's like what is that? Like
Right,
1 minute of the night. I mean, you're
right.
playing for a few hours. Who cares? Like, and keep it moving, or play something super cool right after it, and then you've redeemed yourself immediately. You know what I mean? But like I never. I know Drew's like this too. You know, like there's no shame to play like something corny if you think it's going to work, and if it does work, it opens up your whole night. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it really opens things
Mhm.
up. So, I mean, to me, like it's not about trying to act cool. It's trying to find out what's going to get the biggest reaction. Because, you know, at the end of the day, like if you're a good DJ, you're a good DJ, whether you play Justin Bieber or Hanson or, you know,
Right.
it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? You know,
if the
follow it up with
if
something cool.
if the whole room is screaming at the top of their lungs and someone goes, "Come on, man, what's this cheesy stuff?" You don't even have to explain yourself. You know,
No, you just show them the
Right.
door.
you
Right.
just
There's
the
the
room's
door, bro.
explaining
Like,
it for you.
this
Yeah,
isn't the part. This isn't your party. You know what I mean? This isn't the party for you.
yeah, 100%.
One of the other things we wanted to talk a little bit about is just like motivations of being a DJ, kind of when you started DJing versus motivations of people being DJ today. Do you kind of want to discuss a little bit about that?
I can't speak too much to the kids today other than, you know, just sort of guessing at what their motivations might be. But I mean, there was no blueprint to be a successful DJ when I started at all. We just did it because I love combining music together and I love music in general. Basically, like a backyard party was kind of the pinnacle. And then as you got older, maybe you'd play in a club. The bar scene wasn't really as big, you know, back then. There wasn't DJs at bars. There was usually jukeboxes. Like the
Right.
really, it was like a backyard party and then a real nightclub. Those were kind of the options. The bar thing, having DJs at bars was not a thing back then. So, you know, I think for me, you know, it was really just about like I got the bug of like putting music together. I mean, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to keep going with this. And then luckily for me, things started to open up. I feel like after that, you know, the scene got bigger and DJing, you know, especially through AM, got legitimized in a big way. And it also became something that you could viably do for real money. I mean, he changed the game for DJs making money. I mean, before I met him, I think the bar that I was playing at, I was making like $150 or like $200 for the night, you know?
Yeah,
And then when he put me on at LAX, he paid me 600, which I
yeah,
was like, wow, this is like a lot more than I was making, you know? And then when I started
Mhm.
traveling, it was in the thousands. And it was like, that was all because of him. Like, cause he was doing gigs that were, you know, 10 grand, 25 grand, you know, like these crazy gigs,
Right.
but he lifted everybody up. So everybody started getting paid more that was even associated with him. But then also those venues started to value a good DJ and started to pay more for the residents. So the residents went from making, you know, 150 a night to 300, 400, 500. Then, you know, DJing sort of became like, okay, we can make money doing something that we already love to do. Right. So I think for me, the initial was just the music and putting music together. And also, we were not on stages. We were in dark corners. And
Right.
I sort of became comfortable with that. Being on a stage and having lights on you and having to sort of
Earhart's.
pretend like you're a, this magician or entertainer or whatever it is that, that these people try to do, cosplay character, that we see a lot of those. But that's kind of alien to me, because like when we started, we were just off in a corner, but the cool thing about that was that the emphasis was on the music and the environment of the club, like the lighting and like the environment, the way that it was inside the club, creating a mood or a feeling. Whereas now it's like everybody just sort of stares at a stage. So it's a little different. So I think the motivations because of that have changed, right? And because of that, and because of social media, a lot of the people, it seems like, I would say, hypothetically, it seems like a lot of the DJs are getting into it because, they can be an entertainer and they get a lot of attention for being up on a stage and putting it on their social media. And so the emphasis of maybe combining the music and putting it together is not the primary motivation. The primary motivation now is something completely different. Maybe it's going viral. Maybe it's, getting a whole bunch of likes or things like that. And, quite frankly, for me being an old guy, I can't really relate to that too much. Like that was never my motivation. So I think the game has changed a little bit. And I think sort of people that are in the middle that sort of bridge the older way with this sort of newer, social media environment that we're in now, I think bridging that is difficult for you guys, especially because you're coming from a place to a whole new place. And it's like, okay, I don't know if I dig this. Like, how do I fit into this whole thing? And how do I, how can I make a mark? Because you see people doing these things that are getting a lot of recognition for something that's doesn't feel legit to you. Maybe, you'd be like, what is this? This is, I don't get this, So yeah, it's a tricky thing. I don't have all the answers for it, but I see it
Would you say
happening.
hypothetically, one of the examples that you might be talking about hypothetically would be somebody singing and dancing to the music and just standing there?
Hypothetically, yes, that would be what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I can't totally relate to that. I sort of look at that and I'm like, wait, is this karaoke or are you a DJ? Like,
well,
I'm not sure, like I'm sort of confused.
the major difference I've been saying is when we were getting started, we just had to love music. There was no career. Everyone told you couldn't do it. And, you just kept doing it because it was awesome and fun and you just loved music, right?
It was almost like a hobby. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
100%. It was a hobby. It was like, I can't help myself. I love collecting these records and I just want to go and, I don't even care. But some of my early DJ gigs were a jug of whiskey and a box of pizza, right? And and nothing would make me happier than getting, when we upped the price of the whiskey, right?
Right.
That's how I get Drew to come to Cincy still. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like, Drew, you come out here, I'll give you a box of pizza and a thing of whiskey. And he's like, all right.
Yeah, but not well whiskey. You're going to do top shelf whiskey. You know what I mean? Gourmet pizza.
That's where the price is. But now that was our influences weren't just because we loved it. And then eventually, AM and these people that were doing open format and just changing the game on what you could do and you could make a career out of it versus a lot of the younger DJs came up with Zed and these festivals and this,
right?
It was a different thing of why they got into it. It was their performance or their bands, was the DJ and to stare at. So I don't know. I think at some point some of my favorite gigs are when I'm just creating a vibe and not in front of it. And every single person's coming up like, dude, this music is amazing. But it's because you're not standing in front of me telling me what to fucking play. It's just let me do my job,
Yeah. And I think like, in general, like DJing is not that exciting to look at. So if you put a DJ on stage, naturally they're going to have to like act out a little bit. But I think some of that brings out, behaviors that maybe me as an older guy that's kind of corny, because, like at the end of the day, what is the purpose of going to a bar or a club, right? To hang out with friends, drink, maybe hook up with somebody, that kind of thing, right? It's not a concert venue. If you want to go see a concert and watch somebody on a stage, you go to a concert or a festival. But if you go to a
Right.
club or a bar, it should be more about the overall environment and the feel of it. It shouldn't be about some guy standing up there on a lighted stage, because this isn't a festival and it's not a concert. It's just a club, right? But I think in general, people get caught up in whatever is popular or whatever, and so they tend to go that direction. And a lot of other things too is like people see something that is successful or getting a lot of praise, and so they just think that's the way to do things. They're sheep, sort of like. But I've always kind of thought, the best way to do anything is to see what's out there and see what people like, but then put your own unique spin on it and do it differently. And that goes for all aspects of DJing. Like come up with a different way of doing it than everybody else, and that gives you that identity. So yeah, I mean that's just the way I always approached it. I'm sure I would have to come up with a whole bunch of new tricks and stuff in today's DJ world, but I mean that's the general philosophy.
All right, so we're gonna move forward. We're gonna do a funny DJ story. So this can be funny, crazy, a night from the DJ booth that's went great, a night gone terrible. It doesn't matter. We got a segment video here that Drew produced, and then we'll get into it.
You're crazy, man. You're crazy. I like you, but you're crazy.
All right, there it is.
What did I just watch? I don't even know what that is.
You know what I need to change the video to is the video of Warren at the club. I know that's what we need to change the video to. That's what we need to change it to.
That's amazing. That's
what it needs to change to.
Yeah.
All right, crazy DJ story, funny, wild, sad, all the above. Whatever one you want. We could be a couple.
Okay. Let's go with great.
Okay.
Best DJ story ever. I got AM asked me to do a Sweet 16 party at LAX. It was like on an off night, like a Tuesday or something. And he asked me in advance or whatever. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And as it got closer, like within a week, I started prepping for it. Because I usually the week before I'd prep for whatever gigs or clubs, start doing edits, whatever. And I'm thinking about it. I've never done a Sweet 16 in my life, Start thinking about it. I'm like, oh, it's a bunch of kids, like, oh, I don't even have clean versions of everything, And I was like, so I hit him up and I'm like, hey man, like, I don't know, this Sweet 16 thing. Like, I don't know if that's for me. Maybe you should ask somebody else to do it, because I didn't even know what it was for or anything. And he's like, no, bro, you're doing it. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, because I've assured Jimmy Iovine that you're going to kill it for his daughter's Sweet 16th. Now, if you guys don't know who Jimmy Iovine is, he is the owner of Interscope Records. He is partners with Dr. Dre on the Beats headphones with Apple. They sold them for $1 billion. He is one of the biggest players in the history of the music business. You can look up his credentials. He's the man. Okay.
He has that documentary with the Ones, right?
Yeah. Had the Ones.
Walks through his stuff.
That's called the Defiant
Watch
Ones.
that.
Yeah.
The Defiant Ones. Watch that.
So basically at that moment, he tells me I'm doing Jimmy Iovine's daughter's Sweet 16. And I'm like, oh shit. So now I'm really nervous because I was already nervous about playing for a bunch of kids. He's like, but you don't have to worry about playing songs with bad words. You can do whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I prep for the party. I get there and LAX is like it's at the club LAX because the young girl wanted, to have it at a nightclub because they can't go to a nightclub at that age. Right. So we have it and LAX is like at the peak of the height of its fame at that point. And we get there and it's like on lockdown. And I take Joy with me, and Jerry, DJ White Matic, who you guys know, came with me. He was always kind of my like right-hand dude with, any equipment issues or any, having to deal with people coming in the booth. Like he was my guy. Right. So he's with me and Joy's in the back of LAX where the bar is. There was like the way LAX was set up was it had the primary area of the club. And then it had like a bar area kind of like behind, like in a separate spot. There was like a back bar and she was back there and she's like, Secret Service is back here. I'm like, Secret Service? Like, what is going on, And they had like Jimmy Iovine had like this assistant with a headset, and he would come up to me and tell me what to do or whatever. And he like came up to me and he's like, okay, he goes, we're going to do happy birthday. I need you to kill the music. When you see the, sparklers come out or whatever, you got to kill the music. And then our special guest is going to do the happy birthday. And then when that's over, you got to play Family Affair by Mary J. Blige and Dr. Dre. And I was like, sure, no problem, So I kill the music, the sparklers come out. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is then he's then the governor of California, right? And he's the guy who's going to do the happy birthday. So it's full Arnold, like doing the singing, leading everybody in happy birthday, right? The 250 16-year-olds. And then, of course, the adults come out or whatever. It's like super surreal already, right? So they get done with that. And he's like, let me kick it back to the DJ, right? And I drop Family Affair. And of course, all the kids, the song still totally worked at that point. It was a big song. All the kids are come out to the dance floor or whatever. They're dancing, and I'm looking down at the computer trying to figure out the next song I'm going to play. And White Matic like taps me on the shoulder and he's like, dude, you got to look in the middle of the dance floor. And I look up from the computer and there's all these kids and they're like in a circle and they're dancing around Mary J. Blige and Dr. Dre. We're dancing together. And all the 16-year-olds around them as I'm playing Family Affair. And I remember just sitting there and I'm like, I have to soak this in because there will never be another moment for me DJing like this. And there never was like anything that came close to that. So that was definitely the craziest and best DJ memory that I have.
It came from a gig that you really didn't even want to do in the first place.
No, right.
Yeah.
I was forced into it. AM forced me to do it. No, you're doing it. I already told him you're going to kill it. And it's funny. You know what song Jimmy Iovine, he made me play it 3 times. The song that he really wanted, it's so cringy now. Well, I mean, it's a great song, but like playing this artist is like kind of like not really the move. It was Ellie Ignition remix.
That's hilarious.
He made me play it 3 times in a row. And the funny part was he didn't make me play it. He sent his assistant over. Jimmy would like to know if you could play it again. Oh,
wow.
From the top. Yeah. So that was the big, that was his big jam at that point was Ignition remix.
What did you play after the Mary though?
I played Gold Digger, I think.
Okay.
Which was a huge record at the time.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Massive.
So this was like 2005 or whatever. So, or it was either end of 2005 or early 2006, but Gold Digger was like a big record. So I played Gold Digger after that. And of course it worked. I mean, Mary J and Dre, slowly left, of course, but to go to the back, but the kids loved it. So yeah, that's what I followed it up with was Gold Digger. I still remember that. I don't remember what else I played, but I do remember something crazy about those kids was I was playing like 80s music, like Prince Kiss and like In Excess, Need You Tonight and stuff like that, like mid-tempo 80s. And they loved all of that. And I'm like, these kids are awesome. Like they were, I mean, this is, whatever, 17 years ago, but they were like super into it. I remember thinking like, man, I was dreading this gig and this gig ended up being like amazing, so that one worked out. And then, I don't know, any other club stories? Let's see.
I have one I want you to retell if you can. This random time in, Kevin calls me up and he's like, hey dude, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. I'm just chilling. And he goes, I'm picking you up. Get ready. And that was all you told me. And then the rest of the day turned out to be this wild fucking day in Venice. It was Green Day. Tell the story, but I didn't know about it until we actually walk into the house and the band is there, and I'm like, what where are we?
Yeah. So Kevin Kerslake, who directed the AM documentary and a number of other things. He was like the guy in the 90s for music videos, and he still does. Like he just finished a whole project for Smashing Pumpkins, and he's the guy in 90s alt rock music videos.
By the way, when I met him, I geeked the fuck out because I looked at one, he made some of my favorite music videos of all time, like Come As You Are.
Right.
I mean, Helmet. Just the list is just nuts.
His resume he made. His resume is unbelievable for 90s rock music, and the guy's still a legend. He's done so many cool things, and him and I have become we work together quite a bit on the AM stuff, and we've become friends and whatnot. And he was like, hey, I'm shooting a music video, and his role was he was just in that particular video was just the director of photography. It was actually Timmy Timebomb from Rancid that was
Tim
directing
Armstrong.
it. Yeah, Tim Armstrong was the one directing it, and it was for a new Green Day song. And it was at Kevin's house in Venice. And he's like, if you'd like to come see how a music video gets made, I want you to come out and have that experience. And you can bring somebody with you. Well, I knew Drew was like a huge Green Day fan and just, rock fan in general. And I didn't tell him right away. I was like, hey, you want to go do something cool? Like we're going to, go, it's for, I think I told you like a little bit, but I didn't like,
you didn't tell me what the band was. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm
I think I just
positive
gave
about
you,
that.
I gave you like need to know information, which was very little. And we get there and we walk in and they have like full catering truck outside and like there's tons of extras and there's like a it's a full rig at his house. Like, I mean, it's like they had a crane. They had a crane.
Yeah.
Remember there was a crane in his
crazy.
living room, like a camera crane and everything. And like, so we get there and it's a video for Green Day. That Bang
Revolution
Bang, right?
Radio. Was it Bang Bang? Oh, it was
Yeah,
Bang. It's
Bang-
on the
it was
album
Bang Bang.
Revolution Radio on the album, but it's the video for Bang Bang.
Yeah. So here we are. We're on the set of the Bang Bang Green Day video with and we're hanging out. We're hanging out with like Tim Armstrong and the band. We're talking to the
kitchen.
The band, and Curse Lake and all that. And all of a sudden, like they're working on this shot and they got all their extras there and they're trying to fill this space. And so they turn around and look at me and Drew and they're like, could you guys go stand over there, like in the corner and like fill that space by the window? And we're not dressed for that. Like all the extras are in like full gear. Like
they're like punked out, kids that would go to a show, and we don't fit the part at all. It's like
at all.
We put the old guys in the corner,
totally,
with all these young kids all with spikes and shit.
So I'm thinking we're just standing there, like I don't know what's going to happen, and neither does Drew. And we're just standing there, and like we're kind of like, all of a sudden we're part of this thing, and it's like, okay, action. And the band starts playing and everybody's freaking out. Me and Drew are like, oh shit, like, I guess we better start like, headbanging or whatever.
Well, Billy Joe is like right in front of us, like literally right in front of us. And we're just both geeking out at the fact that we're standing this close to Green Day. And then we're supposed to like act a fool at the same time.
We're like, how did we just end up in a Green Day video? Now, ultimately we didn't end up in the video, but like there was a good, what would you say it was like 15 minutes where we're like, holy shit, we just ended up in a Green Day video. And this is really weird and really uncomfortable, because it was like, we would have, if we would have made the final video, it would have stuck out like a sore thumb, dude. It would have been so bad. Oh, thank God. But it was a awesome experience. And like Drew looked at me afterwards, we like went back and we were like in the backstage and we're watching them as they're shooting it or whatever. And he's like, how did that just happen? And I was like, I don't know. Like,
well, I don't know if you remember this part, but we go outside and we're just hanging out and we were just talking and they take a break and we just happen to be in the right place. And the bassist, Mike Dernst, comes up and we have a 30-minute conversation with him about vintage furniture. About how he decorated his house and he had curated all of this furniture all from vintage shops. And it was a great conversation. It was I don't think we talked about anything other than vintage furniture. It was like awesome.
It was pretty surreal. Yeah, that was a fun day. I love stuff like that where you just have no idea like what's going to happen, and then the craziest thing happens, and then years later you think about it, it's like, yeah, man, that was pretty fun, But that was a good one. And we always tease that one to other people, like, hey, Drew, tell them about the time we almost ended up in a Green Day video, and everybody goes, what? And I'm like, oh, sorry, we don't have time to tell that story.
Well, I've never told, we've never talked about it on the podcast. So yeah, it was a good one. Go watch Green Day, Bang Bang. It's a great video.
It's a cool video. The whole thing took place in Kevin Kerslake's living room, and it came out really good. And the crazy thing I remember about that was like, Kevin had like a camera on his shoulder. Remember that big old camera?
Yep.
And like he just would go like right into the audience and like just do like all this crazy stuff and get all these crazy angles. And we would see it on these screens, like behind everything. And it was so cool to like watch him, create the whole mood and vibe of this thing. Didn't you think? Like I was like blown away by that. I was like, wow,
it was awesome. I mean, Tim Armstrong also I was geeking out on because, his Operation Ivy Rancid, just so cool, just hanging out with him. Yeah. Fuse doesn't even know he's got the shirt on.
Oh, that's
And
crazy.
He's there and just telling us to do it. And I don't know if you remember this part, but they had this little tiny boombox and they were playing it in the kitchen on the other, like it wasn't even the same room. And Green Day they're just kind of going along with it from this little boombox, and they would hit play and it would just go, all right, play it again. And it's the tiniest sound, and that whole room is shaking. This old vintage house, the whole room is bouncing. It was just such a cool experience.
I remember, I remember another part of that was like, I pulled my phone out. This is like the early days of like, Instagram or whatever. I pulled my phone out and I had it I was standing right behind Tim Armstrong. He's in like the captain's chair and everything, and I'm standing like right behind him because the whole video is sort of taking place in front of him. And I like pull my camera out, and right when I pull my camera out and start hitting record, he turns around and stares at me. And it was kind of like, a no-no, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't, are you posting that? And he's like staring at me, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't think I should have had my phone out, And I remember like freezing, like I was like, don't worry, I'm not posting it, and he's like, all right. Because I didn't really know him at that point, like that. I only knew Kevin, but yeah, I remember that being like kind of embarrassed.
He also doesn't look like a guy you want to piss off.
No, definitely not. He's just as imposing in person, even though he's like the nicest guy in the world. Like in person, he's I mean, he's not somebody you want to cross. You know what I'm saying?
No, not at all. Amazing day. Any other stories, or we're going to move on and close it out with the sauce?
Let's see. Any other stories?
I just want to say that I've heard so many stories from you over the years that it's always crazy to because you were such close friends with Adam, the places that you ended up over the years. I remember a time in Cincy, you were telling me a story about how you went to AM and Nicole's engagement party at Lionel Richie's house, and just like who was sitting at the table, and just that kind of stuff like that is just crazy.
Yeah, that was a crazy one. So yeah, when Adam and Nicole got engaged, they had a big party at Lionel Richie's house in Bel Air, which is an insane house. And like we all drove up this hill, and then they would take your car like and go valet it somewhere, off site or whatever. And AM was invited all the homies. So it was like, Homicide and Stone Rock, and who DJ'd it was Larry Graham, who DJ Dig Dug from Body English was the DJ for it, because he wanted like all the local homies to just go. He didn't want us all to DJ, and so. Right. And it was like Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray, and because Adam was friends with all these people, right? And so it was like Adam's crew, which was a bunch of us that were basically just goofed off, and then it was like Nicole's friends, so it was like Lindsay Lohan and like people like that, right? But when we walked in, one of the things I remember when we walked in the house was they took your cell phone or your Sidekick or whatever it was at the time, and they put it in these little bags. And you weren't allowed to bring it in because they didn't want anybody they had signed some agreement with like People Magazine or something to be the only photos at the event. Right.
Right.
And so they took our phones away or whatever. And I remember Lindsay was like freaking out over it and like just totally arguing with the people. Like, you can't take my phone, like just bugging out. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so they take all our phones and we walk in, and it's like incredible setup there. Like, I mean, they had like, I forget, I think it was Nobu or it was like a sushi place, like making, all the sushi chefs were there making fresh sushi, and they had like all this different food, and the DJ booth set up, and then they had this whole area out by his pool. And it was like, it was really surreal because it's like Lionel's friends too. So it's like, it's Quincy Jones, and it's like, all these huge people. And then, you got Mark McGrath basically just screwing off the whole time, because he's like a comedian, right? So they had this chocolate fountain. But it wasn't dark chocolate, it was white chocolate, right? And like a fondue fountain, right? And they've got all the different stuff. They've got like bananas and like all this stuff that you can dip into this fountain, right? And so he like he like grabs one of the bananas and he sticks it under the white chocolate fondue fountain, And he goes, look, it's the John Holmes dip, you know, and he's like making all these crazy jokes. And like, I mean, it's so embarrassing. And like Adam's like getting uncomfortable, you know, he's like, hey man, you know, like keep it down or whatever. And I remember the other funny thing that happened at that party was my wife had to go to the bathroom. And this is like a big house, you know, and so she's like, I gotta go to the bathroom. We'll be right back or whatever. And so she starts walking in the house and she realizes that she's ending up back towards the front door. And then there's Lionel standing there and he's talking to somebody. And she's like, oh, there's no turning back now. Cause Lionel now stops talking and turns and looks at her. And he's like, can I help you, dear? You know? And she realizes that he's talking to Quincy Jones. So it's Lionel and Quincy Jones, and they're standing there and they're staring at my wife, you know, and she's like, I was just looking for the bathroom. And he's like, he couldn't have been cooler. He's like, oh, it's right there, you know, blah, 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 or whatever. So she comes back to all of us, right? And she's like, oh my God, you know, she's like, I just met Quincy Jones and Lionel Richie. I was like, really? Wow, what happened? And she goes, yeah, I asked him where the bathroom was. I was like, oh, like all the things, you know, it's like, so that was a fun one, you know. Yeah, but a lot of crazy stuff like that happened, you know. The Adam era had a ton of really surreal moments like that, which, you know, is another reason why it's a big loss, I guess, right? Is like there are a lot of insane things that don't happen in regular life happen. That was one of them for sure.
It's wild, man.
Some cool stories.
Good story.
Yeah. The last thing we do, we call it the sauce. You know, it's any advice that you would give to your younger self, anything that you might do different, any future plans kind of that stand out. We got a segment video we'll roll and then we'll get into it.
The name is Bootsy, baby. And this shout out goes out to Drew and Fuse, all the way from Cincinnati to the LBC Bobble. Yeah, I was told you guys are quite the chefs. And you got a delicious sauce that you cook up. Ooh! And it drips that swagoo and breaks down the recipe. Yeah, and you giving up the pig because it's funky. As in good, that is. Finger funkin' good. On the one by the power of the one. Yeah, without that, there is none. So get yours and be in tune with the one that loves you. Get it, baby.
That's an ill one. Bootsy's shirt was incredible. Did you see that? Oh man, Bootsy still got it, even though he's like 154 years old.
That's the one that we'll never replace. That's the go-to video for life on the sauce.
So
never
good.
get replaced. Yeah,
that one's great.
So yeah, any younger any advice you'd tell your younger self? Anything you wish you did different, or any plans for the future as well?
I mean, quite frankly, I got a lot farther than I thought I would DJing, you know, because like originally, you know, like I was DJing as a hobby, and then I started doing, you know, backyard parties, and then eventually bars and clubs, and then it really turned into something much bigger. So like, I don't know that I'd change a whole lot. One thing I will say is, I think if you have the ability to do certain things, like if you have a lot of like invites to do cool stuff, push yourself to do all of them, because at the end of the day, like when you look back, you'll want those memories. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Like back in the day, when AM and Steve Aoki were doing Banana Split, it was on a Sunday. And a lot of times he always wanted me to come out on a Sunday. And just to paint that picture, like I would be traveling, you know, maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, different cities, or Friday, Saturday, different cities, be on a flight home on Sunday, land, be tired from the weekend. And it's like, oh, Banana Split's going on, you know, like he wants me to come out. He's texting me or whatever. And I remember being like really tired and like having to really push myself to go there, because, you know, like I live outside of LA. So for me to go to Banana Split, it's like an hour away. And it was like, I remember a lot of times, like my wife was like, you know, you should go, like Adam wants you to go, you know, like we should just make it happen. And she had to work like the next day at like 7 a.m., you know, and we would go out there on Sunday night and be out there till 2 a.m. and then drive home and get home at 3 a.m. And then she'd go to work, and, you know, I'd be like exhausted. And I remember, like, now looking back at that, how special of a party that is, like, just in the lore and, like, you know, the DJ lore and the music lore and all that. I'm so glad I did that, and I pushed myself to do that, because I have those memories, and those memories mean a lot to me now. Because you know, I could have easily just been like, nah, man, I'm tired. I just flew back from Connecticut. You know, like, I just flew 6 hours. I'm exhausted. I don't want to drive an hour to go out there. But I'm glad I did those things. And I would say, for somebody, you know, I mean, obviously that's a pretty extreme example. Not everybody has that. But, like, if there's things that you have going on, or friends that, you know, want you to come out to a night or support them, or go do things that maybe you normally wouldn't do because you're tired or whatever, or it doesn't fit in, I would suggest to do them, because you never know when those things might end or not happen. You got to embrace, like, your moment. You know what I mean? You got to make things happen. So that would be my advice for my younger self. I should have probably went more. I mean, there was a lot of times where I said, nah, I'm tired, you know, I don't want to go, but I push myself. But I would definitely encourage my younger self to, like, do even more of that. Because there was nights, like, even with Dexstar, like, back then, to get booked, you had to go out. If you were out in front of your manager or whatever, like, they would remember you. And then the next day, when they got the call from a club, they booked the last person that they were with, because that's what's on their mind, right? So, like, back in the
Right.
day, there were DJs that would go to all those nights in LA. They'd always be out, because being out meant, you know, maybe you'll get that extra gig or whatever. And there was a lot of times where I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not driving all the way to LA. I'm not doing that, you know. But that was really the way some of the guys ended up, you know, really establishing themselves, was to go out and to network and to be out at other people's nights, show face, you know. I think that's important, you know, to push yourself.
Yeah.
If you really want it, you got to go make it happen, you know?
Yeah.
It's true. It is.
Great advice.
Oh, well, the other piece of advice that I would give young DJs is to embrace your identity and who you are, and put that out there in the form of content. Whatever it is that you're into, there's an audience for it, you know, whatever type of music or whatever. So, you know, make mixes, let people know what you're into, you know, on your socials, things like that. People will gravitate towards what they like, and you'll find people that are into what you're doing. And it could be a very, you know, a slow build at first, but eventually it builds into something. I think, even Drew, you mentioned to me the other night, I kind of mentioned how I thought it was really working well for Fuse, these building blocks and these things that you've made happen for yourself in the city that you're in. You know, you became the Cincinnati Red. You love baseball. You're wearing the hat right now. You became the Cincinnati Reds, you know, music guy, and you're DJing there. You've partnered up and opened your own bar, which is a huge. I never did anything like that. It's a huge step. You just got asked to go to DJC and DJ a set of music that you like, that you're into, as a showcase. These are the stepping stones. These are putting your identity out there and then having it manifest itself into something. And, you know, Fuse is a great example of this. This is how, you know, you do it, and you keep going, you keep building, and then the steps start to get bigger and bigger. I mean, DJing at a stadium for baseball fans, when you are a baseball fan of that team, is a big deal. That's a really big deal. So, you know, this is, you know, Fuse is a great person to listen to for this on this podcast, other than episode 100 with me. I'm saying hypothetically, if you spend your time, if you spend your time listening to the podcast with other guests are on, you should listen to some of the things that Fuse says, because, you know, like, this is a guy who's basically doing exactly what I'm saying. The actions I'm saying to take, he's taking those actions. And Drew is too, honestly. Like, Drew's residency, the bungalow, I'm sure you guys have mentioned it on the podcast, Drew. I'm sure you've talked about it or whatever. I want to give a little bit about that from my perspective. So for those people that don't know, the bungalow is a big deal. And it's a big deal because it is one of the few really open format rooms where music is at the forefront. And that's because of the owners. The people who own the bungalow is Brent Bolthouse and Jen Rosero. And Jen Rosero and Brent Bolthouse were two people that were doing the night that AM did at LAX back in the day. They were the ones that put AM on in Hollywood. These people are music people. Jen will talk to you about music for hours and hours and hours, and she knows her stuff. I mean, that woman knows her stuff. And Drew is now, to me, playing for Jen Rosero is the highest level of open format DJing. Because let me tell you something, she doesn't take any shit. And if you're playing crappy music, she lets you know. Period. I mean,
Facts.
you can't get away with anything when she's around. And you know, that's good. That's why her venues are successful. That's why she's still in this business. And the thing is Drew is playing there. That is a very high level of DJing, you know, and you guys, you know, maybe people that listen, they don't totally understand that, you know, you two guys are doing today's version of really taking strides towards reaching your goals and doing the things that are important out there. You know, building brands, staying true to identity, playing at the best venues, and doing things for, you know, companies and people that you believe in. I mean, you do something for Fit Radio. What was that? Drew was just mentioning that you did a big party for them and that you have over like 1 million streams or something for that. I mean, that's a mind-boggling number. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of those things, you know, people should take away from listening to you guys on this, that it is a process and it requires the steps that you guys are taking to get there. And it did for me too, you know, it just in a different way. So I think that's what I would tell young people, you know, like it is small steps that lead to big change. You don't always have to hit a home run. Put it in baseball terms, you know, like you can hit a bunch of singles and you're still going to score a ton of runs. Like they don't all have to be home runs. You can do it by just doing smaller steps.
I think sometimes too, you know, the laying the foundation of the smaller things and, you know, end up to bigger things. There's something to be said for, you know, everybody wants to get that instant gratification. Sometimes there's something to be said for doing the right thing and, like, you know, not building stuff for long-term success. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I mean, you know, they are building blocks and stepping stones, and like you don't know what leads to the next thing, you know. Like I do have one more story for you guys that I've never told on any podcast or anything, and that is it was like right after LAX opened, and Adam had this thing where like he did a lot of private parties in Hollywood, and what he would do a lot of times is sometimes he would double book himself, you know. So somebody else would have to close out one of these parties that he would do. And these were like, you know, big industry parties. And one of the times he was like, hey, I need you to close out this party I'm doing in the hills. It's for the launch of the Xbox 360. And I was like, okay. And because I got to go do this other party at LAX, you know. So I went with Albie. Albie was one of my buddies from LRG, and we show up to this. It was a mansion in the hills, and we show up to this mansion. There's like a red carpet outside. There's all these people taking pictures, and they have all these Xboxes set up inside, and the party's in the backyard. And we get to the backyard, and Adam's playing like the coolest music ever. Like it's all like rare groove and 70s and like just dope stuff, and like, you know, and the vibe is like really good in there, and it overlooks like all of LA. And I get up to the DJ booth and I look around and it's Justin Timberlake and it's Snoop Dogg and it's like all of these huge stars. And I immediately, like, you know, that feeling sometimes when you're like, you almost feel like overwhelmed a little bit. Like you get, it's like an instant shot of like nervousness and you're like, oh crap, like what have I signed up for, you know? Yeah. And Adam was always the type of guy that like when he was done, he's like, all right, peace, I'm out. And he would just pull his records off and he's like gone. And it's like, oh, I better get my needles on. I better get ready, you know? And that's what he did that night. He's just like, yo, I got to go. And he's like, I'm out. You got this. And I remember stepping up to it was like on a little riser and stepping up and looking out. And there's like all these, you know, famous people or whatever. And I remember going to reach for the tone arm and my hand was like shaking. And I was like, it was the most nervous I'd like ever been, like at a party or whatever, or at a gig. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if I get through this, then everything else is easy. So this is like as hard as it's going to get, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember like after like the first mix or whatever, I was fine. Like it was just playing. It's like riding a bike, you know? All right, I know what I'm doing. Like I'm good. And and it ended up being like no big deal. So I would say like you got to embrace those types of things. Like even if you feel like maybe you're not ready for them or whatever, just go for it. Like do what you do. You know, like stick to your guns. That's why having signature mixes is important. I remember doing a few of my signature mixes that night because I'm like, well, I gotta have something to impress these people. You know what I mean? This is like the biggest people in the industry. And you know, that really worked out. And so that would be, I guess, my sauce hypothetically for you guys.
Yeah. A little tiny thing I want to add is just looking at all three of you. We all have kind of gotten somewhere just putting out like edits or just getting out to other DJs or other stuff. You know, Kevin was originally putting out his version of custom stuff, right? And then we kind of followed along in your footsteps. So, you know, just putting out content, really, it reiterates what you were saying, but you know, we were able to do it through music and other stuff, but a lot of us came from just doing edits, and that's how other DJs got to know our names.
And you know, I think that tradition is still carrying on. I mean, people like Nick Bike, for instance, is making some really cool edits on his Patreon page, and you know, that's a whole different way to do things. But I mean, that's a guy that you know, is kind of doing what I was doing, but for this era. You know, back in the day, you know, I was doing it a slightly different way, but now there's these new platforms and new ways of doing it. And I like his stuff a lot. I mean, we saw him at all three of us saw him at the DJ conference, not this year, but the past year. And I mean, he blew away that room, you know, and he blew away that room with programming and playing really cool edits that he made. So that power to do that, the thing that I was doing all those years ago, is still there. It's still just as powerful.
Right.
And he's a testament to that because he's doing it, you know. It's slightly different than what I was doing, but which is good, but like it's still, it had that power. I remember everybody in that room that night was like, are you listening to this? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and that was an example of, you know, edits and programming. You know, music still has that power, and DJs definitely shouldn't lose sight of that, because that's a real thing, you know. Focusing on practicing, making edits or finding edits that work for you should still be at the top of your DJ list. It shouldn't be like, you know, social media first and then practice second. It should be the other way around, you know, because it all falls into place if you're a great DJ. And to be a great DJ, you got to put in that work, you know. So that'd be some of my advice too, even for today. Like it's important to be good at it.
Yeah. Amen. Well, this has been incredible, and we couldn't have asked for a better person to have on episode 100, season 3. So thank you for being on.
Oh, I appreciate you
thank
guys,
you.
man. You guys are
we
my guys.
appreciate
I'm
it.
proud of you guys. I'm proud of you
Thanks.
guys, man. 100. That's a big number. Pretty
Yeah.
impressive.
It's crazy to think that, you know, like for me, it's always crazy to think like that, you know, we're basically playing other people's music and making a living off of doing it in a lot of different ways, you know, but that's what started it all. And I'll never forget, like, you know, the opportunity when you were like, you and Simo should come to Vegas for Jason B's birthday party. It was just a birthday. That was the invite. That's the, like, I feel like had that not happened, the DJ career could have went this way. But like from that moment, that's when it went, you know, up. And I feel like that's the moment things changed for me, you know?
I didn't even know that. I didn't know that you,
Yeah.
I didn't. Wow.
I feel like, you know, at that point, I feel like Simo and I just had a few edits up on the site. I think I had opened maybe for you one time, and then I had met you one other time because Tony had opened for you most of the other times at that point. But like, you know, going there and meeting everybody, you know, for Jason, I think it was the Fetty Legrand year. I think that was that year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
2011.
Is that when it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, like my philosophy was always the same with that kind of stuff, is like, if you see somebody who you think has a lot of potential, introduce them to a broader world and see what happens. And,
Right.
you know, that's what people did for me. So, you know, I know we're capping it off, but let me rewind again for a second. Like, back when I was at off campus, I wanted to make records, but I didn't really know how. And I met a guy, Richard F., who was on Subliminal Records later on. He was a big house producer, and he lived in Fullerton where the bar was. And he invited me over to his house, and he showed me how he makes records, and he was distributing them himself. And I was like, oh, I could do this myself. Like, that was the blueprint. He opened me up to that world, kind of like what I did for you, right? And then when I met AM, he opened me up to that whole other world, like the story I just told about LA and Hollywood. Those things were totally foreign to me. And he just sort of threw me into the water and said, sink or swim, you know? And that's kind of like, I really believed in that. And like, after I got my opportunity, when I was at LAX and AM finally let me have an opener, I put on Sprite. So Sprite was, making edits for Crooklyn Clan, but his primary job at that point was he was a video editor, but he had a lot of potential. I mean, Sprite is an incredible talent. And I was like, why don't you come, open the first hour, just, play R&B. That was the thing to play back then, was R&B at the beginning of the night. And he was making edits and playing R&B and doing a great job. And then I said, why don't you come on the road with me? Like, I'm doing a gig up in Sacramento and San Francisco. Come be with me. I'll see if I can get you to open at those places. And it was like for my birthday. And so I like talked the club into, hey, can I have my own opener? My manager did at the time. And so they let Sprite open both of those gigs. And that gave him, a look into that world. And he met some of those people, and those people got to see him play. And, from that, obviously, I'm not saying that's why he built a career, but, like I helped, kind of introduce him to that, and did the same thing that AM had done for me. And I did the same thing for Steve Wonder, also opening for me in LA. And, I just really believe in that. Like, I believe, like, if somebody has potential and they really love it, like, provide them with some kind of opportunity, or give them some kind of line to see what happens. And so that's really cool for me to hear. You've never told me that before, actually, about going to that party. So that's cool to hear, because that's really what the goal was. Like, hey, why don't I invite the kids from Cincinnati out and show them a little bit about like what we're about, and see what happens. Yeah. And, you took that ball and ran with it. And, Drew, my story for Drew was, Drew opened for me at Heat, and he was the best opener I ever had up to that point. I mean, it wasn't even close. He played the perfect music, didn't burn me, super nice. And I immediately took a liking to him. Like, I was like, I like this guy. And I told my manager, I want to start playing at Heat more, because A, it's close to home and I can sleep in my own bed. I don't have to get on an airplane. And B, this opener is great. Like, he knows what he's doing. And we had some really good nights in there. Oh my God. And, when you're DJing, like, you're headlining, of course you get the peak hours, right? So you're going to get when the club's at the craziest.
Right.
But a good night is built off the foundation in the early part of the night. The vibe that's created before you go on is critically important. And Drew always understood that. And it was, again, when he was doing his own blog at the time. And that was something that, we were looking to incorporate. And it was like, why don't we throw Drew a bone? Like, hey man, do you want to do this blog thing?
That's right. I forgot about that.
You're making edits. Do you want to make edits, like, and put them out? And, so I've always kind of subscribed to that, like that idea that, like, if you see potential in someone, and someone that you get along with, you think has the right temperament and the right personality and really wants to be a part of something bigger, throw them a bone, because that's what people did for me. And so I try to do the same thing. I've always tried to do that. And I see you guys are now doing that for people around you. And so that's cool. That's definitely something, if you're in a position like that, you should consider taking care of the people that show an interest, because I think passing it along is critically important. And at the same time as passing it along is showing them the right way to do things, because, that's also important,
Right.
Facts. Well, we could keep going for the rest. Let's keep going. Let's do another 2 hours.
Well, it's the last episode, remember?
We're doing 4 hours, and then that's the end of the podcast forever.
Me and you have a little app that's coming along. Maybe just mention that, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah. So, Drew came to me quite a few years back about this idea for an app for mobile DJ professionals, to connect them with their clients and make it easy for them to give the details and music requests and all that they would want for their event or their wedding or whatever. And so we got together on that and started designing it, and started working on the coding for it. And it's a big project, but we're getting much closer to having something out early next year. It's called Maestro. That's the working title right now. We think that's going to be the final name, Maestro. Yeah. And it's going to basically be like a DJ assistant. So it's going to, for the DJs, it'll keep track of all their events and connect them with their clients. And on the client end, it's going to be a free app they download, and it's going to be a really simple interface where they can just fill out the information for whatever event that they're having. So if they're having like a wedding, they'll be able to fill out basic information like, names and things like that for like themselves and bridal party and stuff, but then also things about the venue, where it's located, are there stairs, how many guests are you having, like all the details that a DJ would need to know in order to service that event the right way. And then also be able to connect like their Spotify and give requests, like the music that they want to have for all the different parts of their event, cake cutting, the open dancing that they're going to have, all that type of stuff. And that is, in essence, that's what the app is about. And that's what we're going to be putting out there for the DJ community. Drew, do you have anything you want to add that I might have skipped?
No, it's exactly what it is. I mean, really, it's cut down on the back and forth of the emails, and let the client take as much time as they want on preparing without having to reach out to you to answer a basic question. So
yeah, and then also it being mobile friendly, the idea that that, let's say if it's a bride, she can get that done wherever she's at. She's out and she's got some downtime or whatever, she can just start going through the app. She doesn't have to like sit down, open a laptop, get out in front of a computer, the way that a lot of the other companies that do this do it. She can just do it right from her phone at any time. She's laying in bed getting ready for to go to sleep or whatever. She can fill out a bunch of this information very easily. That was the goal. The goal is to make it as simple as possible for the DJ's clients to get that information to the DJ. It's like, that's the bridge. So that's the goal of the app we're working on.
I may have hypothetically seen said app, and I may hypothetically say, and it could be pretty awesome.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Is that the name of this episode? Is hypothetically, potentially.
This is going to be the YouTube title. Potentially, hypothetically, episode number 300.
One plug your other stuff. You had the AM doc. Just plug all your website stuff.
Yeah. So this year, it would have been Adam's 50th birthday, and we had a situation where the As I Am AM documentary was not on the major platforms anymore. It got taken out of distribution by the family, so we had to try to find a way to get it back out. So Kevin Kerslake got the rights back to the film, and we put it back on the DJAMdoc.com, and we did a director's cut that adds 7 minutes of footage to the original, which is really cool. But then we also got to do 2 extra bonus features that I pitched to him. And because Adam had a unique life where he was obviously a very well-known, famous DJ, but he was also an addict, a recovering addict who did a lot of work in the recovery world. And I pitched to him, let me do a 3-hour, a big feature on AM's DJ career, just on his DJ career, all of his influences and everything that was about the DJ experience for him. And then you do 3 hours on the recovery world. And so I finished mine a little bit earlier this year. It's called DJ AM, the Artist, and it's a 3-part series. It's 3 hours long, and it covers everything about AM's career. And it's just a bonus feature to the original film. And it's available there to stream. And eventually it will be on the major platforms, Amazon, iTunes, all of that, as soon as Kevin completes his part and we can submit it all. But the reason for that is the film itself, it is a fantastic movie, but it is very, very heavy, and you have to be in the right mindset to watch it, because it deals with all aspects of his life. And some of them are, difficult to watch over and over again. So the idea behind doing the 3-hour bonus feature that I did was for DJs to watch and get inspired by his, see the blueprint. This is what he did. This is how he did it. And that was the concept behind it. And the reason I wanted to do it in the first place was to give something a little bit lighter to watch, where you could just focus in as a DJ on all the things that Adam did to become who he ultimately became. So yeah, all of that is available on the DJAMdoc.com right now. You can go stream it. It's out. And then eventually we will be on all the major platforms, probably make another run at trying to get a major to pick it up, like, like a Netflix or a Showtime. Cause the original did run on Showtime for a couple years, but we're going to eventually, when we get it all back out, we wanted to run again on a major platform where everybody can stream it. But if you want to support the project now, you can on the website.
Amazing. Go check it out.
And yeah, there's Instagrams too, if they want to flow, right?
That's right. So I do run a tribute. Well, I have my own, obviously, Instagram page is DJ Kevin Scott. I do have a mix cloud with a few of my older mix CDs. I may, or hypothetically, release new mixes in the future. And that's DJ Kevin Scott mix cloud. And then the DJ AM stuff, I run a tribute page for him, and I have all of his mixes up as well. And those are mixcloud.com/DJ AM lives. And Instagram.com/DJ AM lives. So you can check out those if you're more interested in learning about, his story and seeing all the stuff going on there. And those are the ways to contact me as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on with us today for episode 100. We really, really appreciate it. It's always great to chat and hang out. So
yeah, man, thanks for having me on, guys.
Else?
It's an honor, absolute honor. I love both of you guys, and I'm proud of both of you guys that you made it this far and everything you've done in your DJ career. Thanks for having me on, talk about old shit and hypotheticals. I really appreciate that.
All right, man. All right. Peace.
All right. See you guys later.